Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 546. Epilogue 5. The Eternity and Epilogue. Part 1. Han Suyong and Yu Young-hyuk were taken away in stretchers to the hospital where Kim Dokja was staying. While listening to the round of Yi Seol-hwa's non-stop nagging, Han Suyong calmly organized the plan of action she came up with. And exactly 1 hour later, she told the companions of her idea by using the most concise words she could think of, while leaving nothing out in the process. However, you speaking concisely and precisely didn't automatically mean your audience would concisely and precisely understand you. The companions' reactions were like this. "What do you want to do, again?" Jang Hui-won asked back, while both Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gil-young dropped the jaws ever so slightly. Han Suyong replied. "Okay, so, if I put it in a simpler perspective, you are aware of what you've been saying until now, right?" So you did understand me? We can't do that thing again. Did you already forget about the memories from 2 years ago? What happened to us after the group regression? I'm not saying we should regress. This and that are the same. If we cross the world lines again. I'm also not saying we should distort the other world line's future, either. You did hear what I said, right? I just want to send a single novel to that side, that's all. E.G. Hai, silently listening to the conversation, finally opened her mouth. Okay, what you're saying is, you want to show the novel written on this side to Dokja Ajusi in the other world line. Did I hear you right? You did. What meaning doing that will have? Han Suyong started her explanation in a composed voice. The most ancient dream is Kim Dokja. And that Kim Dokja was broken down into many pieces and scattered around to the rest of the world lines before reincarnating into different existences. You with me so far? You think I'm a dummy because I got an F last time? Okay, so what's next? The important part starts from there. The newly reincarnated Kim Dokja might not be Kim Dokja anymore. However, that doesn't mean he isn't the most ancient dream either. They themselves might not be aware of it, but all those souls are the most ancient dream that maintains this universe. Back when they escaped from the final wall, for the last time, no one was left behind in the subway. Yet the universe's time didn't stop. Meaning, the most ancient dream hadn't disappeared. The souls that used to be Kim Dokja had scattered to the rest of the universe and reincarnated, and unbeknownst to even themselves, they were dreaming of the different universes. Yu Sang-an nodded her head as if she understood it. So, you meant to use their power of imaginations. The imagination of the most ancient dream is reality, after all. Making the reincarnated Dokja SSI dream of the conclusion we all want. That's right. It'll be like we're presenting him with the source of imagination. So that they can dream about this world's conclusion. Han Suyong studied the faces of her companions one at a time and continued on. No one will get hurt this way. No one born in other world lines will get harmed. All we have to do is to make those guys read a certain story, that's it. Countless Kim Dokja scattered throughout many world lines would all be imagining it. Those born with various appearances, living in various environments. There was no meaning in meeting them or bringing them here. The only thing the companions could hope for in this situation was a miracle. A miracle that could bring back Kim Dokja they all remembered. It was fine even if it was all a delusion, a lie, if only he could imagine their happiness. If only all those countless Kim Dokjas imagined the one single universe. A short bout of silence descended on the room. A similar sort of expression was floating up on the faces of everyone. They knew full well such a plan had zero chance of becoming reality. In order to make this plan work, several impossible hurdles had to be cleared first. The one who spoke up as the representative of the companions was Lee Hyun-sung, who returned to the country only about 30 minutes ago. Suyong SSI. He had returned in a hurry after hearing about Yu Young-hyuk and Han Suyong's news. His eyes, always burning with righteousness and will to fight, were now obscured by heavy shadows. We're all too tired. We're too afraid of hoping. What made a person truly exhausted was not despair. No, it was hope that seemingly was on the cusp of coming true but would never become reality. Han Soo-young also knew that. She slowly squeezed her fist tightly. I know that. That's why I'm asking all of you for a favor. Lee Hyun-sung's eyes trembled the moment he heard the word favor. Han Soo-young had never, ever used that sort of expression before. I'm aware that it has a very low chance of becoming true. That's why this is merely a type of ceremony, if you will. Something that must be done to put the finishing touch on the past and to live the remainder of my life properly. Jang Hui-won asked her. What can we help you with? Rather than a verbal reply, Han Soo-young placed her notebook PC on the hospital room's desk and accessed a certain text file, one that they were intimately familiar with. A novel with its title still left as no subject. Han Soo-young slowly, so very slowly, began typing the title of the novel. Asterisk. From that day on, Han Soo-young poured her entire being on writing the novel along with assistance from her companions. Even if it was her, she didn't retain every bit of memories in perfect order, so to complete the story, she had to borrow her companions' own memories. So, we'll make Dokja Juicy read this novel. But, how will we do that? We somehow need to make him come across it naturally, without him feeling any disharmony. To the extent that he doesn't even realize he's currently imagining this world. Meaning, we gotta write a seriously entertaining story. Dok Ja-hyung read a boring novel till its end, so won't he read it even if we write it like, whatever? Han Soo-young looked at the glib-sounding Lee Gil-young and shook her head. We don't know what might happen, so we gotta do our best. Kim Dok-ja of Otherworld Line might not be as patient as ours, after all. Let me help. Me too. Nuna, you don't know the lingo the teens use nowadays, right? The novel was compiled in Kim Dok-ja's hospital room most of the time. After ending her lectures, Han Soo-young would come to visit him in his ward. Other companions also took turns to pay him a visit. Sorry, I'm late. I had an announcement to make tomorrow, so, said Lee Ji-hai. It would have been still fine to come after you were finished, replied Han Soo-young. No can do. Today's the scene of my awakening, right? Lee Ji-hai's voice was filled with so much excitement. She scanned the manuscript Han Soo-young had written and continued to yap on. Wow. This place. I really almost died back then. Kuhyu. Reading this part again still gives me the goosebumps. Yoni, you don't mind me asking you when I'm supposed to show up, AG? If you're planning to bother me, just get out. Ah? Why are you being so cold? I even found a mistake in the setting, you know. A mistake? Where? I never said anything like this. Lee Ji-hai pointed at the screen. Han Soo-young glanced at the younger girl's phone and spoke up. A closer look revealed that the scene in question came from when Lee Ji-hai was saying her piece during the cinema dungeon. Han Soo-young explained. Some creative license is unavoidable, so some parts might be a little different from what happened in reality. But that part. Why do you think you're alone? We're here together, aren't we? No, hang on a sec. I'm always by your side, aren't I? So, don't lose hope. Think about our kid. I wrote that according to what Uriel told me, though. 1 day. 2 days. 3. Sentences were diligently compiled. When she couldn't recall the past properly, she'd even start pinching the sleeping Kim Dok-ja's cheeks. And when her resentment flared up for no reason whatsoever, she'd even write some weird things in the novel, as well. Find the ugly king. Well, it probably didn't matter, anyway. He'd not even realized that this was his own story, after all. The companions came to visit the hospital room in alternating turns as if they were entering confessional booths. Actually, Dokja SSI was cursing a little bit during here. Don't write what I just said. Understand? Hey, I told you to omit the part, so why? They all seemed quite surprised by the fact that they still remembered so much of the story, and no, wait. Nuna. I do respect Hyung, but what are you doing? portraying me as some sort of a religious fanatic. And they seemed to be finding peace with the fact that they still remembered this story, too. They sometimes cried, or read the memos containing story beats that would soon form the part of the story in the future. Shin Yusung asked. By the way, why did you portray regression so negatively like this? Well, even in that world, Kim Dokja should only have one life, that's why. He might get badly influenced by reading this, right? I mean, he could still be a young kid there. At her reply, a shadow drew upon Shin Yusung's complexion. But, we regressed, didn't we? In that case, will it be fine to write this part differently from reality? Nah. I'm just going to write it as is. Pardon? But why? Doesn't matter who, every human is a regressor, you see. There was a certain sentence she thought of while fighting against Yu Young Hyok. In all honesty, she didn't expect Shin Yusung to get what she was saying, anyway. The younger girl stared at the sentences for a little while, before shifting her gaze to the outside of the window. Our regression couldn't influence this world line at all. When I think about it sometimes, it feels like the last night's passing dream. What is the difference between the past that couldn't change the present, and a delusion that can't change anything? Han Soo-young was somewhat taken aback from that, and her lips bobbed up and down in a pout, only for Shin Yusung to shrug her shoulders and smile back at her. What if we write it too hard to understand and Dokja Jusi doesn't get it? Kim Dokja will definitely get it. You really do believe in him, don't you? If you're going to bother me like this, just get out. No, wait. I've organized everything that happened in the past, you know. Even the disaster of flood you asked me about, I have. Not everyone was as helpful as Shin Yusung, though. No, actually, the majority of them simply interfered with her writing, instead. For instance, in Jang Hyung's case. Hey, you. You said I'm the second part's protagonist. What are you basing that on? You making fun of me? That's just a figure of speech. You're not the real protagonist, right? Han Soo-young replied. Even then. I'll write side stories about you. In huge chapters, no less. Cool. Lee Seol-hwa passing by while pushing a stretcher past the room also said something. Normally, healers in a story like this are portrayed as heal shuttles, aren't they? Fine. Lee Seol-hwa, you get a side story, too. On top of this, Lee Gil-young completely skipping his school to come to the hospital, and Lee Hyun-sung throwing a big tantrum as if he had been wronged by something. You just omitted all the events I had to go through after signing the contract with Abaddon. And also, I've lots of skills, so why is it always cockroaches this and cockroaches that? You've completely revised my military life. But, haven't I earnestly described everything that happened since my days as a private? Both of you, will you just put a lid on it? Kim Dokja is the main character of this story. I'm telling you, this isn't your story. Han Soo-young yelled at them. Even constellations came to visit one by one after hearing about the news. For instance, Uriel carrying huge piles of unidentifiable documents while kitted out in a disguise of sunglasses and a face mask. You should have called me right away if you were planning to write something like this. And I have this much extensive data on the subject matter, too. Can any of this data even be trusted? I mean, what you said differed quite a lot from what Ji-hai told me, you know? And no, well, it can be a tiny bit different, but. This universe is truly vast and countless Kim Dokjas are living out there in countless world lines, so. After that, the great sage, heaven's equal. If you're going to write about my fable, you should have at least read the fully translated Journey to the West. Have you? I read it as manga. In that case, you should know by now who the real protagonist of the Journey to the West is. I thought it was Tang Sanzang? Then, the abyssal black flame dragon. How disappointing. Have you really forgotten about my true name? It's already the second part, so how come my true name hasn't been Dash? You never told me in the first place. And you know what, you don't have to tell me, either. And so, around the time the first draft of the manuscript with about 250 chapters was completed, Han Suyang became almost completed, wasted from all the fatigue building up inside her. It'd be her first time writing a novel so arduously like this. So many parts of it weren't to her liking, and too many portions needed lots of revising. But right now, the quantity was her priority. Because Han Suyang. It'll be this week, Saturday. Because there wasn't a lot of time left, that's why. Chapter 547. Epilogue 5. The Eternity and Epilogue. Part 2. Now normally, you'd need around 2 years at most to complete the first draft of a manuscript. However, there was no such leeway in this world line. The system is losing its powers too quickly. If we miss this week, then I fear that we won't have enough persuasive power to launch the arc. In the end, Han Suyang decided to start the first wave of transmission after finishing up the second part of the manuscript. The companions grew excited after hearing about the news of the manuscript's dispatch. Yu Sangha asked, "How will you transport the file? In a USB? We'll prepare for various contingencies, but fundamentally, it needs to be taken in the form of a fable," replied Han Suyang. "Who will deliver it, though?" "Obviously me. No can do. If Suyang SSI leaves, who will look after Dokja SSI at this place if something happens to him? Even if he was only a shell, he was still Kim Dokja. If something strange happened to him and Han Suyang possessing the Bureau's fable wasn't around, his main body might crumble away." Yu Sangha continued on. "Let me go. I know the exact coordinates of the world line where Dokja SSI has reincarnated." But that only prompted Zhang Huiwen to try to dissuade her. "Sangha SSI, you need to defend this world, you know." "Let me go. Give me the coordinates." "No way. I'll go and meet Hyung. I'm a Jusi's incarnation, so obviously I should go." "That's not right. I'm the foremost expert on all things related to the Demon King of Salvation, so it should be me." Yi Gilyang, Shin Yusung, and even Zhang Haiyang joined the fray, turning the inside of the hall into pure chaos. Constellations and incarnations were arguing with each other, saying they should be the one to make the trip. Yu Sangha sighed while looking at them. "It's not as easy as you all think. Everyone here is aware of how dangerous it is to cross a world line, yes?" "Well, yeah. If the coordinate I traced is correct, then the world line in question is right at the outermost edge of the universe." "Outermost edge?" "Meaning, it's a world where scenarios might not even exist. No one knew what the world Kim Dokja had reincarnated into was like. It could be fundamentally different from their Earth. The system's grace could get much weaker when you reach there. Which means, the powers of both skills and stigmata will naturally weaken, as well. The length of the voyage will be quite an ask, too." Anna Croft, listening to the explanation, nodded her head in agreement. She then looked up at the Ark currently performing a test flight up in the sky. As the vessel has been cobbled together as a single-seater, the equipment installed on board isn't the greatest. Especially when you're crossing the dark stratum, enduring the storm of aftermath will prove to be a massive challenge. Only the person possessing a very powerful mind is qualified. One mistake, and you may even end up as an outer god, that's why. The outer god, that term cast a dark shadow on the expressions of a handful of the companions. They had recalled the sight of hounds chasing after the abyss, doggedly pursuing them, that's why. Unfortunately, Anna Croft wasn't done with her explanation. And there are far too many world lines where his soul has scattered to, as well. At the bare minimum, you'll have to cross hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, of world lines. Are you prepared for that eventuality? Hundreds of thousands. Even if you were to cross one world line per day, the trip might end up lasting for hundreds of years with that estimate. Even if it was for Kim Dokja, could anyone be able to last that lengthy period of time without losing their sanity? None of you are capable. The man who could survive even when receiving the absolute minimum grace of the system. The man who would not lose himself even when swimming against the boundless torrents of time. And that's why, the man with the highest odds of succeeding in this mission among the companions. I'll be the one to head out. The Ark's passenger had already been decided. Eventually, the Ark's date of departure had arrived. Han Suyang observed Yu Yunghyak currently getting ready to disembark from some distance away. I'm not putting on that thing. Conquering king, you must wear it. Don't forget that you're no longer the same as your past self. Now, this was a spectacle she would have liked to show to Kim Dokja of 5 years ago. If he heard about how the prophet was trying to ensure the safety of the regressor, just what would be the thoughts entering his mind? You're really becoming a bother. You might be saying that now, but this will definitely come in handy later on. Being a transcender does not mean you're completely free from the system's influences. Transcenders are existences validated only through their opposition to the system. If the latter disappears, then the former's powers will, of course, grow progressively weaker in turn. Yu Yunghyak glared at Anna Croft with disapproving eyes, before putting on the offered equipment one by one. This is a cumbersome attire for combat. You are not going there to fight, so it'll be fine. Yu Yunghyak's new bloated appearance after putting on the spacesuit was truly a sight to behold. Han Suyang began teasing him. That look really suits you. You're being noisy. You should think this over. You really want to do this? Even as the departure time crept ever closer, Han Suyang still didn't feel confident at all. Honestly speaking, maybe there was no reason to go this far. The voyage about to take place this time was completely different from the regression or jumping between the world lines. They weren't trying to change the past, nor were they trying to steal the right materials to open the final wall of the other world line. This voyage, in some ways, was much closer to a pilgrimage. One where he was trying to commemorate that one person they had been searching for all this time. Hand over the manuscript. Your manner of speech hasn't changed even though you stopped being a regressor. Han Suyang sighed and opened her right hand. The power of a stigma she had been developing until now was circling around the tip of her hand. Stigma, cloud system, is on standby. This was a similar method to how, the fourth wall, handed the text files over to Kim Dokja in the past. The stigma itself was evolved from her, predictive plagiarism, capable of sending obtuse messages across the world lines. It's possible for those possessing this stigma to share the manuscript. Coming back to Earth several times for the new versions will be too difficult even for you, so I'll just keep sending you the manuscripts through the cloud. Are you telling me to learn your unique stigma? We don't have the time to. Right, we don't have the time. But there is a way to learn it super fast. You don't have a constellation backer anymore, do you? Right away, Yu Yunghyak realized what Han Suyang was saying. You fool, are you really? You think I'm enjoying the idea myself? While furrowing his brows, he accessed his attribute window. When his stigma, regression, vanished, his constellation sponsor had disappeared as well. Plus. Sponsor, none. Plus. He was a completely free man. Are you suggesting that I take on someone weaker than me as my backer? But I won against you the last time. I don't understand the rubbish you're spewing. What, you want to have another go? Even though they didn't concede an inch and continued to bicker, they still finished signing the sponsor contract. Both of them knew this was the most optimum method available, that's why. Constellation, architect of the false last act, has become Incarnation Yu Yunghayak's constellation backer. Incarnation, Yu Yunghyak, has inherited the stigma, cloud system. Two beings' imaginary cloud network have been connected. I've never imagined that I'd live long enough to see the day like this one. I wish I could tell that idiot Kim Dokja about this somehow, muttered Han Suyang. Once I make my way back, I'll kill you first and cancel this ridiculous contract. Try it if you can. After their exchange came to an end there, they stared at each other for a little while. Don't forget. You must not destroy the other world line. You just have to spread this story there. So that Kim Dokja of that world will get to read it, said Han Suyang. I know. Don't die. I'll be back soon. He might never come back. Both of them knew that, but no one deliberately tried to bring that point up. With the exception of one person, that was Appa. The tearful Yumiya held on to Yu Yoonhyuk's spacesuit. "You're lying. You aren't going to come back. You can't, even if you wanted to. I won't abandon you and die." As Yumiya continued to shed her tears, Han Soo-young tightly held her shoulders. Yu Yoonhyuk slowly lowered himself and matched his little sister's eye line, then spoke in a gentle, loving tone of voice. "I give you my word. I will definitely return." As he turned around to leave, he sent Han Soo-young a message. "Look after Mia for me." He didn't look behind once and climbed aboard the final arc. And when Anna Croft gave her signal, the vessel's ignition was turned on. The companions, belatedly hearing about the news, soon arrived and watched everything unfold. The arc slowly rose up to the sky. The voices of the companions wouldn't have been able to enter the vessel's tightly enclosed cockpit. E.G. Hai, breathlessly running over here, looked up at the departing arc. "Aren't you going to say goodbye?" Han Soo-young asked her. "If I do, I feel like it's going to be the last time I see him." Despite saying that, E.G. Hai's eyes were brimming full of tears. Other companions also looked up at the arc without saying anything. Yu Sang-ah broke the silence first. "Everything we wanted to say are in the novel, anyway. I'm sure Yoonhyuk SSI will read it later on." "What's the point of him reading it?" "Hyung reading it, that's all that matters." Lee Gil-young, Shin Yu-sung, Jang Hui-won, Lee Hyun-sung, Jang Hyung, Yu Sang-ah, Lee Seol-hwa, Lee Soo-jaeong, Gong Pil-do, and then, the constellations, too. Everyone stood there and watched the arc leave. Shin Yu-sung asked, "Will Dokja Jusi really read our story?" That was uncertain. No one in existence would know that. This mission had high odds of failure, and the odds of Yu Yoonhyuk coming back home empty-handed were also very high. And their story could disappear as mere cosmic dust in some distant universe. The departing Yu Yoonhyuk should know about that, as well. Even then, he chose to leave. He left, for his own sake. Maybe, also for other companions, too. "If it's Kim Dokja, he'll read it," replied Han Soo-young. At the very least, the people of this world would be able to carry on with their lives while waiting for his news, waiting for Yu Yoonhyuk's return. "He made a promise with me, you see." The arc's flames lit up as it reached towards the distant galaxy. The companions endlessly looked on at the arc getting further away as if it was an expedition ship sailing towards another world. A story written through their lives was disappearing to a place forever out of their reach. Asterisk. The arc is entering the atmosphere. Waiting for the user Yu Yoonhyuk's destination input. Yu Yoonhyuk inputted the coordinates of the world line Yu Sang-ah told him. Even the coordinates of the next nearest world line to it was incredibly far away. Just as she said, that place might not have star stream there. The dimensional acceleration will commence. Portion of necessary energy will be substituted by the coins. Coins amassed in the other world line were injected as the energy source of the vessel. They had lost their value with the weakening of the system, but still, they used to be the strongest fable in the world once upon a time. Before long, the planet Earth could no longer be seen. Entering the dark stratum to escape from the world line. Yu Yoonhyuk recalled what Yu Sang-ah said. The world line Dokja SSI has reincarnated into is located very far away. Meaning, I don't know how long it will take to get there if you leave the world line through the conventional means. The world Kim Dokja had reincarnated into existed outside the ways of survival, a place that had completely escaped from this world line's influence. More than likely, you'll have to go through the doorway that allows you to leave this world line. How long passed by like this? Things resembling bubbles began appearing far ahead of him. These bubbles of various hues expanded and contracted repeatedly within the ominous currents. He even sensed this faint feeling of foreboding, too. Yu Yoonhyuk knew what caused this feeling. Suchuchuchu. The vice king of the outer gods, as well as the master of the dimensional doorway between the world lines. And the existence that opened the path to the 1863rd turn for Kim Dokja once upon a time. Yu Young-hyuk unknowingly swallowed back his own saliva. This thing before him possessed more than enough power to make him nervous, the man who managed to clear the scenarios. Youare. Notttheplotter. A massive eye could be seen within the sea of foams. Yu Young-hyuk increased the speed of the arc, not even trying to dodge that eye. In order to get to the world line at the furthest edge of the universe, he simply had to go through this path. THATIS outside THE story. Doesn't matter. Step away, or I'll cut you down. Yu Young-hyuk aroused every bit of his fables and pushed the arc forward. The Vice King didn't try to stop him. However, it only spoke in a pitying, empty-sounding tone of voice. Oh, THEONE dreaming OFTHE dreams outside, YOUR dream CANNOTBEFULFILLED. The moment he collided with the doorway, the view before his eyes completely distorted. He gritted his teeth and fought back against the storm pouncing on him. A violent storm of sparks began ravaging and devouring his entire body. He endured the urge to scream as horrifying pain akin to his whole body breaking apart took him over. There's one last thing I wanted to ask you about. Han Soo-young's voice trickled past inside his disoriented head. Why are you going so far to save Kim Dokja? You've lost many comrades by now already. Having lost many comrades before doesn't mean you become accustomed to the pain of loss. And also, explosions began going off inside the ark. Debris from the broken instruments began floating away in the universe. I have something I need to ask that fool. Yet another explosion resounded out, and an object pierced into Yu Young-hyuk's torso. Failed to read the world line's coordinates. Warning. An error has occurred in the coordinate recognition device. An error has occurred in the interior temperature modulation device. An error has occurred in the ship's navigation system. Sparks exploding abruptly dominated Yu Young-hyuk's entire body. His vision was dyed in pure white, and his consciousness faded away. By the time he managed to open his eyes, he was already lost in space. Chapter 548. Epilogue 5. The Eternity and Epilogue. Part 3. 40th Day of Drifting. Yu Young-hyuk barely managed to regain his consciousness and discovered a sharp piece of debris stabbing him in his abdomen. He calmly got rid of the debris and checked the status of the vessel's hull. 60th Day of Drifting. He realized that the ark had completely lost all its functions. The navigation system was unresponsive, and he couldn't see a single thing nearby. As a matter of fact, he couldn't even see a single planet nearby. 11th Day of Drifting. With several of the safety systems installed within the ark destroyed, abnormality began manifesting in Yu Young-hyuk's body. System's homeostasis is currently broken. Power of chaos is eroding your entire body. Your fable is crumbling away little by little. Some kind of a problem must have occurred somewhere, because all the abilities realized through the system had become completely paralyzed. Yu Young-hyuk remained calm as he inspected the fables currently with him. Thankfully, his fables were all safe. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is enveloping you. The flames of hell protected him from the bitter coldness. 2nd Day of Drifting. The spacesuit Anna Croft made him wear really did come in handy. If it weren't for the built-in protective functionality of the suit, the rate of his body crumbling away would have been so much faster. Yu Young-hyuk did whatever he could to repair the ark's power source. Although the job performed wasn't of professional quality, the vessel still started moving again. Unfortunately, the collision caused the fuel tank reserved for a rainy day to blow up, and the ark needed his fable energy to operate. He failed to repair the self-navigation system and the autopilot, though. Meaning, he had to pilot the craft personally. 3/40th Day of Drifting. He needed to somehow find his original route. 4/2nd Day of Drifting. As the days of his fable needing to be exhausted increased, fatigue began accumulating in his body. Instances of him briefly losing his consciousness happened more and more frequently. The darkness was eating away at his mind. Why did I come this far? There were moments when his purpose would become blurry, uncertain. He came this far to carry out his mission. To deliver a story to the reincarnated Kim Dokja. To revive the Kim Dokja his companions remembered. Why, though? He still had something he simply had to ask Kim Dokja, that's why. But what was the question? 58th Day of Drifting. The moment he saw Wayne's face reflected on the ark's window, Yu Young Hyuk recalled the forgotten question. In a world where the scenarios have come to an end, what should he do to continue living on? That's right. That's what he wanted to ask Kim Dokja. Because that guy knew everything. Kim Dokja, always thinking about the end. The man who planned for everything, and didn't hesitate to sacrifice his own life to see the conclusion of a certain story. A fool like that should know, he thought. If it was Kim Dokja, then he should know more about Yu Young Hyuk than Yu Young Hyuk knew about himself. That's what the latter thought. The regressor who stopped regressing, just what would become of him? E.G. Hai said that she suffered from nightmares every night. But for him, his life had been a constant nightmare for the longest time. The only reason why he managed to endure until now was because he still had a goal, an aim, which he hadn't achieved yet. However, that goal was now no more, and the scenario had ended, as well. The regressor Yu Young Hyuk was free. But as he stood before the hard-earned freedom, he couldn't figure out what exactly he had finally earned. 83rd Day of Drifting. As his directionless drifting went on and on, the fables covering his skin decreased precipitously. The amount of fable scattering into space gradually increased. His voyage continued on, but he didn't even know where he was heading to. 102rd Day of Drifting. Yu Young Hyuk began reading Han Soo-young's novel. He thought that by reading it, he'd be able to endure against time, somehow. 111th Day of Drifting. While reading about Kim Dokja's story, he began to harbor this faint hint of anticipation. He thought that the Kim Dokja from this story should be able to answer his question. From the first episode onwards, he studiously read about Kim Dokja's life. Some events he already knew, while some others were unfamiliar to him. He'd stop reading when he reached certain sentences, too. That feeling of being left alone past the full stop of the story, right after the protagonist and the side characters all stepped into the sentence of everyone lived happily ever after. Struck by the sense of emptiness and betrayal, the young me couldn't fight against the loneliness and writhed around in pain. What was happiness? That term felt so very alien to Yu Young Hyuk. He thought he might have felt such an emotion from somewhere within the memories of the 0th turn that he managed to steal a glance earlier. However, that was no longer his life. 128th Day of Drifting. To him, the figure of Kim Dokja relying on nothing else besides the ways of survival to survive came across as alien. He read many times, yet he just couldn't understand it very well. How could a mere story like this be able to support a life? 154th Day of Drifting. Little by little, Yu Young Hyuk grew accustomed to reading the novel. He even found some passages that he liked reading over and over again. I grabbed the hind leg rich in the perfect amount of fat and bit into the flesh. The gravy gently oozing out from the meat. I closed my eyes, having even forgotten to chew. As I thought, reading about it and actually tasting it are two different things. It was a scene that happened early on, when Kim Dokja and the companions had recently entered the scenarios, when they roasted the meat from the mole rats. Yu Young Hyuk pulled out a slice of dried meat from inside his coat underneath the spacesuit and began chewing on it while reading that passage again. He slowly closed his eyes and chewed, and it almost felt as if he was with the companions within the damp darkness of the subway. 155th Day of Drifting. But when he opened his eyes, he was still all alone. Yu Young Hyuk dazedly sitting there began reading the novel again. 211th Day of Drifting. He continued to read this story all by himself, and 258th Day of Drifting. And read the story again. 279th Day of Drifting. He finally understood Kim Dokja just a little. 316th Day of Drifting. Your fables have absorbed your emotions. Every time he read Han Soo-young's novel, the consumed fables would regain their vitality for fleeting moments. Although it couldn't match the speed of consumption, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now if he didn't read the story. However, he couldn't simply hold on forever. Kim Dokja within the novel was saying this. That's why you should have read it until the end, you know. What did it mean to read a story to its end? Although he couldn't fully understand it, Yu Young Hyuk still chose to heed that advice. 333th Day of Drifting. Abruptly, he realized the reason why his failure was inevitable. Even if you manage to save the world, you still won't be saved. The moment you save the world you have cast away would pounce on you. Even if you do save one world, every other world you have forsaken will drag you down to hell. Yu Young Hyuk stared at the distant universe and thought to himself. What could have it been like if this was the first, or the second, regression turn? What if he had completely forgotten about the memories from his previous lives? If he had no clue whatsoever of the lives from his previous regressions, then maybe, just maybe, couldn't he have found his answer already, instead of wandering aimlessly like this? Maybe, he wouldn't have to suffer like this? Could he have finally understood what the happy ending of other stories was like? Could he have moved forward, in order to not die? Goo. The ark's hull began vibrating. Wondering what was going on, he enhanced his perception to sweep over the surroundings, only to discover a huge horde dyeing the universe ash-gray. They were existences he was quite familiar with. Existences that were discarded from the world lines, and ejected from the scenarios. The enormous waves of outer gods were flooding in his direction. A faint scent of fear could be picked up coming from them. They were being chased by some things. Quadudak. One of the nameless ones escaping at the rear of the pack was pierced by something. Soon, he spotted the hounds chasing after the abyss, easily numbering thousands, chasing down the outer gods like wolves corralling the flock of sheep. Every time a nameless one was hunted down, an incredible explosion of sparks occurred in between the flood. The storm of energy was gradually growing larger and larger. At this rate, his vessel would get swept up much sooner than later. Save me, save me, save me, save me. Eventually, the front pack of the flood overtook the ark. The nameless ones desperately ran. The eyes of the creatures resembling cephalopods glanced in Yu Young Hyuk's direction. Crack! A monster's body was pierced through without resistance by the hound's fangs. The pitch-black lump of fable spewing out by the dying monster splattered onto the cockpit's window like paint. The cephalopod monster was staring at him in resentment as it fell. Yu Young Hyuk had seen those eyes before, once upon a time. If so, what about the people who are different from me? What about Ji Hyoni, Hyen Sonapa, and Seol Wyoni? Those who fought only for your sake, just who were they to you? Right at that moment, Yu Young Hyuk thought he could finally understand what his was. He understood how a regressor finished with his regressions should carry on living. He understood the true conclusion he was supposed to reach. From the very beginning, such a thing could never be determined by his own will alone. The ark's cockpit is opening. The moment he opened the cockpit, the hounds began rushing in his direction. Yu Young Hyuk gripped the dark heavenly demon sword in reverse and cut the head off of a hound. The waves from the other world splitting apart brushed past while clawing at him. What? You are. He watched the nameless ones flood past him and recalled the story he had been reading not too long ago. Maybe Han Soo-young knew about it already. You wrote my story. In that case, you should also know where my story is supposed to end. She probably knew the truth that this story would never reach the reincarnated Kim Dokja's. That was why he must never return to Earth. He must never let his companions know of his survival. His absence must become their eternal hope. And maybe that was the fitting final verse to the regressor who had destroyed countless worlds. Grrrr. As he continued to smack away the pouncing hounds, Yu Young Hyuk thought about the disappearing story. Be gone. His lion-like roar using magical energy as the foundation caused the hounds hiding in between the outer gods to raise their heads. These hounds then formed lines and attacked Yu Young Hyuk simultaneously. His arms were punctured, and the protective equipment worn over his legs were torn off from him. Fables began leaking out from the ripped-open gaps of the tattered spacesuit. Bit by bit, he was losing his strength. His lengthy regression journey. Yu Young-hyuk instinctively realized that this was his conclusion. This is the end I wished to see. It could have been a slightly more excellent conclusion. If he had made a different choice back then, or maybe, if he chose to go down the better direction, then. Yu Young-hyuk smiled bitterly. In the end, he remained a regressor even until his final moment. He knew it. He knew there was no better conclusion than this. He knew that, regardless of what choices he might have made in different moments of his life, he'd still end up regretting something about them. Even then, he'd regret and eventually repeat the result of all his regretting. You. Who. That was the summary of his life. I'm Yu Young-hyuk. At least a handful of people would be saved by his life. Kwaya dash. Thousands upon thousands of hounds pounced in his direction. As if he was atoning for his sins, Yu Young-hyuk wielded his sword and wielded it some more. With each and every one of his attacks, those nameless ones with forgotten names received their salvation. Coldness began circulating in his entire body. The amount of fable leaking out from the tattered spacesuit continued to increase. He felt dizzy and his vision flickered. Yu Young-hyuk squeezed out every last drop of magical energy. Breaking the sky swordsmanship. Destruction technique. Breaking the sky meteor strike. The vicious, violent fragments of the sword fell like a meteor shower and penetrated the hounds. However, some hounds managed to evade the sword strike and continued to run towards him. KRRNG. Right next second, something collided with his head and the helmet protecting his face broke into pieces. Warning! Your fable is scattering away. Return to the Ark immediately. Your fable is. Adrift droplets of blood were freezing up. Hounds were tearing into his entire body. And the story Han Soo-young had written were breaking apart among the torn, ripped fable fragments scattering away. Miaya. Fables kept scattering away like stardust. Yu Young-hyuk watched that spectacle and quietly thought about the lonely space no one would ever imagine. The nameless ones were witnessing his final moments with their empty eyes. This story they had compiled would be forgotten sooner or later. It had become a story no one would read. Yu Young-hyuk summoned the last vestiges of his strength and gripped the hilt of the sword tightly. He stabbed the neck of the hound biting his thigh, and cut apart its body. A regressor might only know how to regret, but he'd never give up. Maybe this regression turn you are about to abandon could be the one single turn where you might get to witness the end of this world as a human being, you know. The one and only way for him to live on as a human being. And that was to never give up on this story. Quaduduk. Something bit his neck, and his vision was dyed crimson in color. His eyes slowly closed. This really was his final moments. Tsuchuchu. However, he saw the darkness before his eyes distort as his vision gradually blurred. Was he hallucinating? Something was standing over there. The ends of the black coat were seemingly dancing within the pure white fable fragments. What a pitiful sight this is, the third turn. Someone was talking to him from there. This will be my last time helping you.